Hi, we're back with Smarter Markets at the FT Global Commodity Summit in Lausanne. I'm fortunate to be joined by Jason Tate from BP. Thanks for joining us, Jason.
Thanks, Dave. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, really glad you made time for us after your panel. So many interesting conversations going on about all the major developments in the industry, from the energy transition to technology like AI to lingering effects of the war in Ukraine and wars in the Middle East. And I was curious, when you look across all these big developments that are happening in commodities, what are having the biggest effect on your business and how you do business?
Yeah, good question. First, to start off, being at the FT, this is a great conference. There's super senior folks that come to this every year, and the level and nature of the conversations are particularly interesting. What's been shocking this year is power, which is the business I'm in, has been featured almost in every panel, even though it's not, the actual theme or topic of the conversation there. So I think when you think about what's happening in our industry, I think first you have to start with what's going on the generation end, right? And to no surprise, we are decarbonizing and electrifying as a society. And so with that, we're greening up our generation stack. So with that, I think no matter where you sit, you're seeing a significant amount of renewables being deployed. And with that is having a pretty profound impact on volatility, right? So for Germany, for instance, 2 weeks ago, we had Germany producing 30 gigawatts of wind. 7 days later, it's producing 7, right? And so how do markets cope with that variability is going to be, one of the major challenges. And three other things that are topical, at least on our minds at BP. Number two would be around talent, right? The human capital point. We have underinvested from a power perspective, and many other commodities may say the same. I can't speak for them, but we have underinvested from a power perspective in talent over the years. And it wasn't a bright spot coming out of uni, right? Some of the best and brightest were chasing, technology, were chasing the financial sector. But power isn't about people sitting and looking at screens either. This is, the transition is real. And one of the phrases I just used on the panel was there's no transition without transmission. And, this is going to mean people in the field. This is going to mean, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, and so forth. And the final two, I won't go into them, but are, very much around the regulatory landscape and then what's going on with supply chains. So super exciting in the power space.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the great things about conferences are like this is you get people who are very down in the nuts and bolts of how things are produced. Thought there was a great piece I heard earlier today, you can confirm if I heard accurately, which is that, if you look at artificial intelligence and like the LLM searches going on, they use about twice the amount of power that a typical Google search does.
It's even worse.
Worse.
It was quoted as 9 times in the conference, but I've heard it's 10. So 10 times for a chat GPT search versus a Google. Yeah. So this is not my number, that's an industry figure.
Sounds good. No, but it brings up the point of, if you went back a year, people were talking about how much more electricity generation you were going to need for the transition. So we could get off fossil fuels, have electric cars. Now it's, you have to do that, and you also have to create all this capacity for artificial intelligence.
Exactly.
So never a dull moment there. And I wanted to ask you, when you think about, all these evolving needs in your space, what ways do markets and market infrastructure need to change to keep pace with the evolving commercial needs of your business?
Yeah, I hear that question, I think of two things. One is, the grids themselves, right? And so one of the big bottlenecks that's been experienced in our industry is getting grid connects. And that could be things around, entities bringing flexibility through batteries, or industry to provide demand response. It's challenging to get a grid connect. Or if you're looking to bring on a new offshore wind farm, right? The types of times that I'm hearing, could be between 6 to 8 years, right? Before, filing for the permit, going through all the consenting, and then getting ultimately to electrification. And so that's a particularly long time to manage that. And then relative to markets themselves, with the growth in renewables, a lot of these renewables are pursuing things in or subsidies called contract for difference, which you're probably certainly aware of, right? And these are programs that many of the governments are putting forward to help stimulate the growth in renewables by providing a strike price and therefore revenue certainty for these projects to get financed. But with that, we also have classic coal and some other thermal generation coming off of the stack. And so we're losing a lot of the liquidity on the back end, right, as that goes away, because they would have traditionally been hedging clean sparks and dark spreads on the back for any kind of near-term volatility and some hedging happening on the front end of the curve. So very dynamic at the moment.
Yeah, one of the other conversations, of course, has been around people in recent years, consumers, wanting to understand much more where their commodity comes from. So kind of understanding the provenance. Is it being, what's the carbon intensity of its production? What are the ESG characteristics of its production? And I was curious because I heard someone brought that up in a conversation in the hallway with me earlier in the day, that's also happening in power markets, that as some of like the tech companies in particular get into needing larger data centers for things like artificial intelligence, they're wanting to know where's this electricity coming from, almost down to the second. I'm curious, are there certain things you're seeing like that's increasing the technological needs that your business is having in order to track where this is coming from?
Yeah, it's a good one. I think we will evolve to get there. We're not there today. So, I mean, two things running through my head. One is, I think there will be a demand for temporal or time-based, renewable energy, whether it be renewable energy credits in the U.S. or, the REGOs in the U.K. or the guarantees of origin in the EU. There will be a need for something that's time-based, to help people understand, are they hitting some of their 24/7, green ambitions. But you're absolutely right, Dave. The Scope 3 emissions, which is what are the emissions of your ultimate supply chain, those are still very real. They're very topical. We have those with, conversations with our customers, and they are looking to green up their supply chains. So there are different ways that can be done. But that topic will be here for certainly the future.
Yeah. And you brought up earlier, there's, sounds like we need a lot more capacity. Without capacity, you get volatility, whether it's you don't have enough people, you don't have enough base load, you don't have enough flexible dispatch. When you look out across it, where do you see the biggest need for investment in your sector?
Yeah, I think, for me, I would jump to, I think it's around 2 points. One is flexibility, and we'll talk about how that takes different forms. And then second would be the grids themselves. I think this is a Bloomberg number, not mine, but that we need to replace 80 million kilometers or 50 million miles of actual transmission lines globally to effectuate what's being required.
Staggering.
That's staggering. Effectively, that's adding a whole nother global grid on top of what we have today, right? So huge, massive investment. And there are numbers that are published around that. I wouldn't even pretend to guess how large those are. So that's number one. And then second is, how do we create flexibility across the value chain to soak up this, intermittent renewables that's going to come? And this can take different forms, right? It can be demand response on the consumer end. It can be technology there. It can be e-boilers in refineries, things that, BP will be looking at. It can be, advancements in technology on batteries and things of that nature, as well as we do need. And one of the themes of this conference is, folks saying, listen, we're bullish gas off the back of the energy transition because they know gas will be needed to help balance the grids globally. So, yeah, we'll see how all this plays out.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I wanted to ask you one more question before I let you get back to it, because I know you're busy. And that's, obviously this is Smarter Markets. We're always looking for ways to make markets smarter. And I was curious where you might see some of the biggest opportunities to improve markets with better market infrastructure, better financial technology?
Yeah, I think that this isn't about, and we talked about it on our panel, we don't need a revolution of certain markets. I think we need an evolution of certain markets, and it needs to be very thoughtful, right? We need markets to function. And my fear is when you overly regulate deregulated markets, as you know, that stymies investment, right? Two things happen. One is entities will start to add in greater risk premium, right, which doesn't help capital being deployed. Or secondly, the amount of just uncertainty that goes into that market, basically detracts any capital from being deployed. And so my push would be, be very thoughtful. I'm not a policymaker, but be very thoughtful about any market redesign that's being deployed, both on existing and new, direct or foreign direct investment.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for joining us, Jason. Really appreciate it.